So what happened last night? I have a couple of key takeaways that I want to look at in the election. Now, we know where things stand right now with Trump v. Biden, right? So the latest election map, of course, we won't know for a few days. 238 right now for Biden on the electoral vote count. Trump 213, still up for grabs, still counting votes in Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, and still, frankly, even in Arizona, which even though has gone for Biden, those numbers are still coming in. So this is live. We're not going to talk about that. But I am going to talk about a couple of the key takeaways from the past 24 hours and this election cycle that I think we need to pay attention to. Number one, boy, do the Democrats suck. I've been saying this all summer, but now we have the validation. And what I love about post-election data is that it's a stamp. I mean, it is like, here you go, rejected. No more polls. No more Nate Silver polls interviewing 800 people. And then that's how we're going to say, oh, yeah, we interviewed 800 people in a poll. Pennsylvania is clearly a supporter of Biden right now. No, this isn't about polls. This is actual data from last night. These are exit polls. These are asking people when they walk out after they voted, what issues mattered to you the most? And guess what? Those issues, Democrats were not talking about them. 72% of exit polls last night, 72% of respondents in a Fox News exit poll showed 72% of Americans support healthcare for all, Medicare for all. Just imagine for a moment if Biden, instead of trying to say that he was for fracking, now he's not for fracking, but he is for fracking, and he's not going to ban fracking. He's just not going to do it on federal lands and the sort of wishy-washy approach on the environment. Imagine instead of this flippy floppiness, or that like the Talking Heads song, making flippy floppy. Instead of that, what if he had come out and said, you know what? It's time. We took baby steps with Obamacare, and now we're going to take this into the stratosphere. The American people want universal health care. They want Medicare for all, and I'm going to be the president that gets it to you. He would have won. But no. Democrats had a terrible economic message, and number one on the list last night for exit polls was the economy. The Democratic ticket basically ran away from economic issues. And they expected to win? It had some different, like white papers that they released and whatever. But for the most part, Democratic Party was not talking about the economic issues that matter to the American people. Trump won 81% of the vote among a third of the electorate that listed the economy as its top priority. Think about that for a second. Trump won 81% of the electorate that listed the economy as its most important point and the reason for voting. Have you noticed what kind of economy we're in right now? And Trump won? Think about it. Oh, well, we don't know if he won just yet. Okay. But he won in that regard, that those people that voted for him on that message, 81%. Even more amazing is that Trump and Biden equally split the vote among those whose priority is a president that cares about people like me. That was the quote. People like me. You would have thought, oh my God, Biden's the guy, right, who cares about people like me. He's like the average Joe, right? He's Joe from Scranton. He rides an Amtrak. Trump hangs out with porn stars and has gold-plated toilets. And yet they split down the middle on that? People like me? One of the candidates had an aircraft with his name on the side of it. Trump. He's just like me, right? Have you seen my jet? It says Delta on the side. So among these exit polls, I'm stunned by these exit polls from Edison Research, because when you look at the breakdown on this, the economy was top of the list. COVID was top of the list. Healthcare, top of the list. And Trump wins those on the exit poll numbers. how is this possible? It's because the Democrats suck. Their platform was terrible. And you know what? After 2016, this should have been a reckoning. After 2016, after Hillary gets crushed for peddling the same garbage, there should have been a postmortem. There should have been a real soul searching among Democrats. And there was. There was a lot of licking of the wounds, but it was a lot of blaming other people, right? Gosh, if only Jill Stein, only those pesky Green Party voters in Pennsylvania didn't actually get to vote in Pennsylvania, they would have voted for me, Hillary Clinton. If only James Comey didn't release that email story in the FBI a few days before the election, I would have won. There was a lot. It was all about other people, right? And so what did they do this time? This time, they tried to keep the Green Party off the ballot in Pennsylvania. Success. They did. They tried to keep them off the ballot in Wisconsin. Success. Nebraska. Success. So instead of allowing people to vote for a Jill Stein or a Howie Hawkins, we're going to hire a team of lawyers to make sure they don't get on the ballot. Instead of trying to embrace the policies that progressives and true progressive candidates would actually be fighting for. The things that Bernie Sanders was talking about on the campaign trail. The reason that Bernie Sanders was winning in large part for a long time and had thousands of energetic young people at his rallies. In stark contrast to those Biden rallies, where there's like a few mice scurrying through. It's almost like they have to pay people to show up. Same thing was true of Hillary's. When she was showing up in Pennsylvania in the closing days of the election, I was there in Butler, Pennsylvania, covering the election. And I was up in the western part of Pennsylvania, and these Trump rallies were off the charts. Go to a Hillary rally, there's like no one there. It was really sad. It was embarrassing, actually. So instead of embracing these types of policies, Democrats tried to fight against it, and they tried to peddle the same garbage, the same stuff from 4 years ago again. It's a definition of insanity, right? Repeating something over and over, hoping for a different result.
Yeah, but they tweeted that a vote for the Democrats is a vote for democracy.
Oh, they tweeted.
Yeah.
Yeah, look for later today when Nancy Pelosi is going to craft a skillful tweet that's going to throw a lot of shade at Donald Trump. That's what they'll do. They'll tweet.
A strongly worded tweet.
A strongly worded tweet. And then they'll go back to having brunch. Isn't it amazing to think about all of the money that pours out of Hollywood? All of these, these liberal elites and these these limo liberals. All of this money from Jeffrey Katzenberg. He can just throw billions away on Quibi and other things and throw them in Joe Biden candidacies. All of this money pouring in. And it's all for naught. One other big takeaway I had last night was this Lincoln Project stuff. The Lincoln Project, which is that anti-Trump group. They were all these disenfranchised. Let me just frame this for you what this Lincoln Project was. The Lincoln Project was making a lot of headlines in the early parts of this campaign because they were releasing these videos going right after Trump. And these were conservatives making these videos, using his own words against him. So what was this group? Well, this group was like this group of disenfranchised former Washington conservatives that actually had jobs before Trump came in to Washington. These were like the Bush conservatives. These were those types of conservatives. They always had money. They always had jobs. They were the strategists, the think tank guys. And guess what? They were out of work once the Trump campaign rolled into town because they weren't going to hire these lackeys. So what did they do? They didn't go after Biden. They went after Trump. And they poured upwards of $70 million they raised to go after Trump. And these people embarrassed themselves. It raised $40 million just in the last few months to go after Trump. And by the way, all of these liberals, CNN and everyone, anytime there was a new Lincoln Project video, they're like, oh, the Lincoln Project, they're out with one of their new scathing videos of President Trump. Let's play it. So they got all this free advertising from liberal media, the mainstream media. Oh, these are conservatives that hate Trump. Let's roll it. Let's show you that video. Guess what? It didn't work. What's more astounding, the reason it didn't work, and I think the takeaway from this whole project thing is that the idea for Democrats this cycle was that instead of going after the 100 million people that don't vote, they just don't vote because they think both parties are worthless. There's 100 million Americans that don't vote. So instead of Republicans or Democrats specifically going after those people, their agenda was to go after Republicans, those people that had voted for Trump in 2016. Sound like a smart strategy? Well, that's what the Biden camp thought it was. Great strategy. So they're going to go after those people that voted for Trump in 2016. Look, I'm up in Scranton. I know you voted for Trump last time. But I see that you're hurting. I'm Scranton Joe. I'm Scranton Joe. You can't vote for Trump. Look what he's done. He's a racist. He's a misogynist. He's the guy that created COVID. Are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? So that was their goal, was to siphon off these Republicans that voted for Trump. Did it work? No, we have the data. It didn't work at all. In fact, what we now know is that 90% of Republicans who voted for Trump in 2016, this time 93% voted for Trump. It went up 3%. It went up 3%. And you look at this map, and specifically in areas where this is of major concern right now in Pennsylvania for Biden and Georgia. And as these late votes started to come in here, now we're at 94%, 95% in Wisconsin. Some of these late breaking votes were in Michigan. We're starting to trend towards Trump over the last 30 minutes. Yeah, this is not good news. This is not good news for Democrats. So this is their strategy. Let's instead of trying to pick up new voters, instead of trying to pick up some of these 100 million people that don't vote, let's go after people that voted for Trump last time. That's our strategy. So there may be a lot of so-called never Republicans out there, never Trump Republicans that we heard about in the media. But these are all like Washington insider people. These are people that work in D.C. Who cares about these guys? There's not a large voting block of never Trump Republicans out there. Who are they going to vote for? Biden? Or they're just going to stay home? Turns out they all voted for Trump overwhelmingly. And boy, did they get out the vote. Now, we didn't hear the mainstream media talking about the get out the vote effort by Republicans. So this whole Lincoln Project effort to try to scandalize Trump's behavior, the exit polls just didn't care. They cared more about the issues than they did about a Hunter Biden story or Trump and porn stars and his tax returns, etc. They cared more about the economy, COVID, and healthcare. And they voted for Trump. Another big takeaway is that people aren't actually that hot on the Affordable Care Act. People don't really like it all that much. But they do like Medicare for all. 73%, 72, 73% said they would support Medicare for all. And so when Trump says, we're going to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, we're going to replace it with Trump Care, we're going to create our own plan even better. 50% of people are kind of like, hey, you know what? I'm paying more now for my health care under Obamacare anyway. By the way, I also lost my job. I don't even have health care. So, okay, I guess. And even Democrats who were like, yeah, okay, great. Obamacare, yeah, it's 50%, just like, whatever. So that argument didn't really work. That argument from Democrats in the closing days, Biden's argument in the last few weeks is that, look, Trump's going to take away your Obamacare. People are kind of like, okay. But he could have said, we're going to replace it. We're going to replace it with something much better. Medicare for all. And boy, he might have actually won in a big way if he had done that, but he didn't. There was a lot of money wasted. That's another big takeaway. There was a lot of grassroots money wasted and thrown away in some of these races, from Nebraska to Georgia. It was pretty terrible. They saw a massive surge in donations. After Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, there was so much money that poured into these Democratic candidates, and they wasted it. People gave like $5 donations, $10 donations. They're like, you know what? We want a Supreme Court justice. We want you to fight for a Supreme Court justice like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, somebody that's going to stand up for the American people. Workers' rights, not be in the pockets of big companies and corporations. Guess what? It happens. Guess what happened? It turns out that Republicans and Democrats are on the exact same page when it comes to the courts. Yeah, they support Amy Coney Barrett's exact same position. Corporations over workers' rights. That's why they didn't fight. That's why they didn't fight at all. In fact, the differences between Democrats and Republicans on issues like abortion and gay rights are important. Right? We know that they are. But the issues at the Supreme Court, almost overwhelmingly, 70-80% of the cases that come before the Supreme Court are corporations versus workers' rights. And the Democrats, who just laid down and allowed Amy Coney Barrett to be placed on the Supreme Court, the reason they did that is because they don't give a rat's ass about workers and workers' rights. They are in lockstep. These two parties are in lockstep when it comes to corporations. And all of these big corporate donors who got on the phone with Nancy Pelosi and Dianne Feinstein and Chuck Schumer, this is a phone, and told them, don't hold this up. We've got bigger fish to fry. Focus on the real prize. Which I don't even know what the real prize is, to be honest with you, but they laid down. And it turns out the American people didn't want them to. So in these exit polls, the American people, the Democrats specifically, were pissed that the Democrats rolled over on the Supreme Court. It turns out that they actually cared about that. So they read that wrong. Democrats read that wrong. Nancy Pelosi read that wrong. And by laying down to Republicans on the Supreme Court, they lost a lot of these Senate races. And that it was one of the key issues that people voted on when they went and voted in these Senate seats and these House seats, was the Supreme Court. And they read that wrong. I just find that part fascinating. I mean, again, this is something we were saying here on the show. I was saying, for months, or not months, but after Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, like, Democrats had better stand their ground here. And you heard me talking about this at the end of the summer about the number of cases that come before the Supreme Court overwhelmingly are corporations versus the little guy. It's not about abortion. That's always just you always want to wrap it in some sort of a cultural argument so that it's palatable to the voters. Guess what? Voters see through it. I think that's another big takeaway here, is that voters are much smarter than we give them credit for. Not if you're watching this show. We give voters a lot of credit here on this show, but that the main parties and the mainstream media don't give them credit for. Turns out that the American people, on the Democratic side, the progressive side, actually wanted their senators to stand up and not push forward another person that was going to be in the pockets of big business and just cater to big business over workers and workers' rights. Shocking, I know. Isn't that surprising? Shocked. I'm shocked to see gambling going on here. Those are some of my biggest takeaways. I think the bottom line is, though, that Democrats, if you want to put a little bow on this, is the Democrats' failure to expand their base, to expand their tent, to bring in some of these larger progressive policies into their platform, try to grab some of those 100 million voters, was a huge disaster for them. And we see it now in these Senate races. So Mitch McConnell won his race. Lindsey Graham won his race in South Carolina. And by the way, millions upon millions of dollars poured down the toilet by the Democrats in South Carolina trying to unseat Lindsey Graham. Joni Ernst in Iowa doesn't know the price of soybeans, loses. And the list goes on. Susan Collins in Maine wins. So we don't have all the votes in yet, but it looks like this is going to be right now it's sort of tied in the Senate, but it looks like the GOP is going to retain the Senate. So the GOP retains the Senate. Democrats barely hold on to the House, and we don't know what's going to happen with the presidency yet. But just imagine for one moment if Democrats had actually embraced some of these broader, more inclusive policies that we've been calling for on this show, how different things would look this morning. Imagine, what's also striking to me is that the party of inclusivity is now, by these exit polls, looks to be Republican. That workers supported Republicans. That Latinos supported Republicans. Democratic Party, they don't deserve to be a party anymore. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Am I wrong? What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? I'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and smash that like button. That lets YouTube know that, hey, you find us useful. You find value in us. By the way, we're live every morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Time.